part of why I asked you to think about someone you've met or connected with as part of this movement is because this next session is one where I'd really like us to think a lot about who we are, where we are in our journeys, the stories that matter to us, but also the people that keep us going. And with that in mind, I'd like to invite four really cool, awesome people to the stage. So there's Solenne Hamon-Fafard, Hayley Newman-Petryshen, Angelene Prakash, and Tenniel Brown. Please come join me. Okay, so sitting directly to my left is Angelene Prakash, Solenne Hamon-Fafard, Tenniel Brown, and then Hayley Newman-Petryshen. You can tell it's been a long day because I was looking at Hayley and I was like, I know you. I know your name. We organized this conference together and I can't remember it right now. But yeah, so just for context, we have 2 rounds of questions that are pre-prepared, and I'm going to ask each speaker to try to keep to about 3 minutes on the first question and about 5 to 7 on the second. And it's really just so everybody has enough time to share their thoughts. Following that, we'll open it up for some question and answer from the audience, including, of course, our online folks. So our first question for today is, we are talking about how these politics are personal. I'd love to hear what you can share with us about your activist journey in the menstrual equity space and other related movements. Does this idea of the personal as political resonate for you? What about you, Angelene?
Yes, it does, and it does not at the same time. I think there's a problematic piece of so many things today being politicized, and that's hard for me. I used to be a youth worker, and it just felt like anytime we wanted to speak on issues such as racial justice issues that really affected our youth that we worked with. I worked in a community where there was a really high immigrant and refugee population, lots of Black and brown youth and families on, some sort of government assistance and such. And anytime we wanted to, bring them in and name those racial justice issues, and even 2020, the murder of George Floyd, wanting to support those kids and be there was always an issue with that. Because the municipality really was like, we can't do that. We're not taking a stance on this. And there was a script essentially, right? And the direction was like, if they want to talk about it, they can talk about it. But, you as a staff member should not be speaking on this. And that was hugely problematic for me because I was like, why are we politicizing this? This happened and they're hurting and they need support, and where were they come to for that support? So that piece is really problematic for me. It's hard to accept sometimes.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you bringing that up because we experience our lives as activists in really full ways, and often within the context of our daily lives, right? Yeah. Thank you. Solenne, I'm going to pass it over to you. Thanks.
Hello. All right. Hi, everyone. When you first brought that question up, the first thing that came to mind was how isolating and personal my period felt for so many years. It really, really felt like it was something that I was living alone. Even though that's just not the case. It's half the population for the majority of your life. That's something that shouldn't feel so isolating and so alone. But I think in terms of maybe there's less stigma than there used to be, but there's still so much silence. The silence of it is what felt so personal, but not in a positive way. But my activist journey really began when I read Nadia Okamoto's book, Period of Manifesto. I feel like I'm butchering the name, but I feel like that really got me so fired up because it was when I really realized that this was such a universal experience, and your intersectionality, depending on where you're at in society, that'll affect the extremity with which you experience period poverty in terms of access to products or access to information. But what was universal and what felt very political to me was that it touched everybody in some kind of way. And that making it political, making it systematic is how we're going to enact positive change in our communities. And that starts with very grassroots, very personalized interventions, because the stigma is very cultural. It's often religiously based. It's very personal in that way. But there are ways that we can share strategies across we don't have to reinvent the wheel for every new intervention that comes with menstrual equity. And that feels very political. So I feel like the answer is like, yes. And, it's a complex, very kind of convoluted thing. I had prepared something, but then listening to the talks this morning, I just felt like I wanted to tell you all from the heart. I think, yes, it is. It needs to be more political. We can really make this a really big impact. The way we're going about it and seeing so many people fired up with this movement is really motivating today. So thank you all for being here. Thanks for taking the time and fighting for this. It's so important.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing. Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Let's just clap all the time. We should all just clap all the time. It's really exciting to hear you mention Nadia Okamoto's book, right? Because I think for a lot of people that was like a catalyst movement, and she was one of a really important leader in the movement. And so it's exciting to think of her book still on the shelf, not just for you, but for others too. Tenniel, what about for you?
Well, I want to start by saying thank you for having me here. I'm new, and folks have been so warm and welcoming, and I'm getting so many fuzzies in terms of just the connections between the work that I do. So I'm excited to be here. I think I really appreciate this question. In fact, I'm grateful for it. Because I just think it's a rare opportunity to speak about this topic, and I think it really is so important. I think it's vital for all the justice work that we do to be grounded in a deeper purpose, right? So for me, I think that what I do is actually fueled by a burning desire to see change. So, it has to be personal, I think. And when I really think about the work that I do, so a lot of my work is facilitating inclusive spaces, facilitating trauma-informed spaces, helping folks to heal from oppression. It's a good thing that this is personal. Because when I think about the kind of resilience that's needed, the type of commitment to self-care and healing in order to do that work, if it wasn't personal, I don't really know if I could do it, right? So it really does sustain me. And I think that some of the best work is personal in nature. So it is definitely very personal for me. And I really don't know how else I would be doing. I wouldn't be sitting here, I think, if it wasn't. I also wanted to say that because the personal is political, we need to remember to look after the personal, right? And I don't know about you folks. I've lost so many of my friends, colleagues, elders in the community have developed chronic health issues, or chronic health issues have developed because they have worked so hard in this work. So for me, it's like, yes, it is personal. And so we have to look after that. And it just reminds me that the initial fuel that probably had many of us get involved in activism to engage in this type of work, that same fuel can burn you out and burn you out. So it's so important for us to have our little plan, whatever that might be, to look after ourselves, right? And so, self-care is super important, but what about community care? What about team care? Maybe I made this up. Justice movement care? I don't know. Is that a thing? It should be. So it is. Again, I think that most of us are here year after year because this is very personal. And yet we have to remember, because it's so personal, we can burn out.
Hayley, I'm going to pass it over to you, but thank you, Tenniel, for bringing into this conversation ideas about care, right? And it makes me think about ways that we can do politics differently. Yeah. And with that in mind, I'll pass it over to you, Hayley. Please go ahead.
I don't need to press. No, I don't. Okay, perfect. I'm going to read a little bit. I apologize. But yeah, I'll start a little bit with my journey in the movement. I have a very similar one to a lot of people. Caught on campus, no tampon. That's super annoying. What are we going to do about that? 7 years later, here I am. And now periods are my whole day, every day. But this idea of the personal being political is a really important one to me. I think that all politics are personal and that everything that's personal is also communal, kind of like you were talking about. And that everything we advocate for, everything we vote for should be in the interest of our communities and our families and of ourselves as well. I think it's important to think about who we are, not only as individuals, but as members of our community. Because the reality is that none of this would matter if we were here alone on the planet, right? There's like the famous Walter Whitman poem where he says, "For every atom belonging to me is as good belongs to you." And when I'm thinking about what is good for me, I need to think about what's good for you and for my neighbor. And because all of our well-being, I think, is like very intertwined. And this idea of a collective being, that's ultimately what politics should be advocating for, collective good. And that's obviously not necessarily what we see when we see politics, which are messy. But it inherently feels very personal and very emotionally laden as a mission to me. One thing when I think about why I feel politics are so personal is I owe a great amount of that to my parents, two lesbian women who celebrated their 26th wedding anniversary yesterday. And we'll celebrate their 19th legal wedding anniversary in the fall. Today is also International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia, for those who celebrate. And for them, in the 1980s and 90s, every act of loving was political. And that's obviously still true for a lot of people today. And I think that that's why the ethics of feminist love and care and community are so core to how I live and work today. When kissing is political, when holding hands is political, when marrying is illegal, when having kids is near impossible. Everything you do is an act of resistance. And that's, again, so true for people of all sorts of marginalized identities today. And the wild thing is that they would never use that language to describe the way that they lived and the way that they still live. To them, they were living and loving the way that their hearts and communities needed them to. And that's it. But those acts of loving were inherently political, as are most acts of community advocacy today. And I'll also just talk very briefly about a good friend and roommate of mine. So this idea of personal being political, I think, grounds us in both collective action and also personal responsibility. I think that that's important to not forget. My roommate's a big advocate for food sovereignty and community care in the prairies, and she lives with me now, obviously, and every Sunday we host a community dinner that's open to anyone. So we often have up to 25 random people in our small apartment on Sunday evenings. And these dinners give everyone a meal because everyone needs to eat. Everyone has space to socialize because we all need to build communities of support. And this, I believe, is like a weekly political act in our kitchen and around our dining table. So we have to ask ourselves, how am I casting a ballot for the world and politics I want, even when there isn't an election? How am I, within my capacities at any given time, keeping in mind that we're taking care of ourselves too? Working towards making the changes in the world that I think are important. It doesn't start at the ballot box, it starts at the kitchen table. And I think that that's really important to remember, but also, holding care for yourself. I'm really happy you say that. I think a lot of us have been through periods of burnout and they're hard to come back from. And then you're like, how can I take care of my community when I have nothing left, And you do hit that point and it's hard to come back from, but yeah. Thank you.
Wow. Okay. So there's so much going on here, which is what I'm so excited about. And I've already heard people talk about periods for sure, which, as so many of you attested to, is something I think all of us who are here in this room probably could talk about all day if you're like me, right? But we've also heard about food justice. We've heard about student movements. We've heard about racial injustice. We've heard about people doing youth work. And all of these spaces make me think about the intersections and intersections broadly conceived. And that was one of the things that I really hope would come through in this panel. And I won't hide my secret agenda, which is that I'm very interested in thinking about or, supporting conversations where we talk about the ways that periods are now, as I like to say, on the table as a political issue. And what does that mean? And what does it mean also as the movement grows? And how can we in some ways start to level up our conversations? And Megan, who's not here anymore, was talking about how some of the presentations in the first half were really helping her to ask questions that she hadn't asked before. And I feel like this panel is bringing this up in a real way. And I'm so grateful to all of you for that. And so building off of what you've already shared, my second question is connected to that. So when you look towards the future, and as the menstrual equity movement in Canada is growing, where do you see possibilities for activists and advocates to support one another across different lived realities and sectors. And Hayley, we can start with you if that's okay.
Tingling from having to talk first. I'm nervous. But yeah, I think I'll speak firstly about a lot of the work that we do with Monthly Dignity and the idea of community responsiveness as being really core to what we do and how we kind of understand advocacy, how I understand advocacy. And over my years of work in the menstrual equity space, I became extremely aware of the incredible, really intricate, time-consuming ways, importantly so, that advocates respond to and are attuned to the needs of their communities and the way that they listen to each other. And the way that contrasts with a lot of more top-down, widespread programs. Forget the word for that. For my master's thesis, I had the privilege of being able to interview advocates, menstrual equity advocates from across Canada, from coast to coast, and about the work that they do in their communities. And I was trying to understand how they got involved in their work, as well as how they serve and how they learn and how they respond to community needs. So that's to say, how their lived experience allowed them to understand the lived experiences of the people that they served. And so we can call this kind of like hyper-local work, the hyper-local nature of menstrual equity work. For example, one advocate who I spoke to, who has personal experience of period poverty, runs a small period pantry and noticed that people who were using the pantry were using a lot of panty liners. And for those of you who do get periods, you're like, oh, a super helpful thing for managing a period. Like it could be, a last day situation or like in addition to, but for people to be using liners as much as they were was a bit odd. And it was only because she worked so closely with people in the community and people had her personal phone number and were like writing notes to her and leaving them in the pantry. She realized that it was a lot of people were using the pantry, were unhoused and couldn't clean their underwear. And so that's a good way to like supplement for people who menstruate in the meantime. And that's something that I'm biased towards qualitative research, but that no survey would have gathered. Nobody would have shared that. No data collection would have picked up that nuance of like why those products are being used more and by whom. And the issue is lack of menstrual period products, but it's also like laundry. How can we get laundry facilities? How can we get more underwear? And so that act of like listening and being really intuitive with your community is really important as well. And so at Monthly Dignity, community responsiveness is really at the heart of what we do. As is true for, like I said, all the organizations across the country. How do we understand needs? We ask, we watch, we listen. We're in the community face to face with people. Some of our community partners have, my personal phone number. They call us, let us know what they need. My personal email address, my mailing, my personal home address as well. I had to email Google and be like, we don't have a legal address. Please take my apartment off of Google search. We actively check in with social workers to help them assess the needs of their clients because, as the earlier advocate story showed, it's not always obvious. Sometimes we have to ask a lot of questions to really get to the meat of what's underneath that. And I strongly believe that these personal connections are kind of why people feel comfortable asking us questions and telling us what they need and coming up to us in Solenne and SL after workshops and saying I have this problem. How can I help? What do I need? Where can I go? And I think these hyperlocal models are crucial across the community service sector, but that's especially necessary when we think about something like menstruation that's, like Solenne was saying, so silenced and so stigmatized that they're even less likely to express their needs. And that's true across the board. So the last I'll just say is how do we support each other? And I think everyone in here is so wonderful at that already in the movement. But just advocates need to continue to share their stories about how they listen and how they empower their communities and students and whoever that may be, engaging in active learning around that. That is to say, we just have to listen to each other. None of us are doing this perfectly. I'm not doing this perfectly. And we're all learning every day and have such diverse backgrounds and lived experiences to share and learn from, and fostering these national connections at events like today that we can implement at home, that we can learn from and then implement at home are the key to solving period poverty, not just materially, but in a way that's empowering and centered around the actual needs, not just the needs that we assume or that the government assumes. So what do I see in my community that you may not see in yours, or vice versa? What connections and resources do I have that I can share with you? Other advocates and organizations have been so beyond generous with us and their time and their knowledge. And I think we have an obligation to always be giving that support back.
going to pass it over to you, Tenniel, but thank you so much for sharing that, Hayley. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you. My little notes here. I think for me, my presence here as a queer Black woman who lives with fibroid disorder and has access to resources and class privilege is a reminder that no movement can ever address the multifaceted and complex needs of a community without an intersectional lens, right? And so I think that that intersectional lens also has to be based in anti-racism and liberation. So at its core, I think that this symposium, what we're here to talk about, it's all about justice. And I think what we know about achieving justice is that it's a long road, it's arduous, and it's often violent, right? So the reality is that we need to share emotional support, moral support, intel, strategy, pat each other on the back, anything, frankly, to be able to achieve justice. That's what we're here to do. So in addition, the other thing that we know about justice is that we can't achieve it just for one person, right? We need to be seeking to achieve justice for all of us. So one of the things I'm reminded of is in recent years, everybody, if you think about it, we've had laws that were set up to protect some very hard fought things that we've worked for in various movements, many justice struggles. We've had laws that were put in place to protect these things. Well, in a moment, everybody, these laws are repealed, right? So to me, we have to work collectively to not only achieve justice, but to protect it. You cannot do that alone. One movement cannot do that alone. So this movement, the anti-Black racism movement, the anti-poverty movement, a number of different movements, they all connect and intersect, right? And they have to, I would argue. It just doesn't work if they didn't connect and intersect. And by all of these different movements connecting, that's how we can actually ensure effectiveness. We can ensure sustainability. Like that's how we actually make that work. So in short, everybody, we got to work in solidarity in order to achieve individual goals. That's what this is all about. So when I think about menstruation justice, I think about Black and racialized folks living with fibroid disorders, experiencing heavy bleeding, bloating, discomfort. And I think about the ways that being told as a Black person not to complain or ask for anything has led to many folks not having their concerns identified, which is resulting in severe symptoms for folks and for many people, hysterectomies. When I think of the menstrual justice movement, I think of males who experience menstrual cycles and folks who are non-binary, trans, and gender non-conforming. And as we've talked about, other folks have brought up how even spaces like this are not always safe and don't always feel inclusive to these folks' concerns. And these discussions need to modify and change so that more folks are included. So those are the things I'm thinking of. So many connections. Another connection I'm thinking of is kind of the universal fight in many movements to just normalize and destigmatize bodies, right? And ways of being and ways of knowing. So there's a connection there in terms of the work that I do and this particular movement. It's really, really connected, everybody. So for me, what can we do more of? Number one, well, attending each other's events, right? I want to go to a DEI conference and see menstruation justice people there. I'm like, yeah, let's do this. You know what I mean? Why aren't we together, right? That's what this is all about. So I want to see that. Let's network, let's converse, let's know each other. The second thing is just sharing resources, they could be anything. They could be financial. They could be, hey, did you hear about this? But I think most important is wisdom and wisdom about strategies and how to be sustainable. Like, I think is what we need to share. And finally, no surprise that the therapist is like, I want us to care for each other. I do. I want us to care for each other and I want us to show care for each other, right? I want us to speak loudly about the work that other people are doing. right? So many of us have social media, whatever else it is, like you may be posting or discussing something that you're doing, but what about amplifying, right? Someone who's talking about ableism, like why aren't we amplifying each other, utilizing the platforms we have? So I see a bright future, folks. There's a lot of beautiful things. And what we know, that the history tells us that when we work together, that it literally is the only way.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I just want to enter into that rich landscape you have painted. It feels very wonderful. Yeah, very caring and nurturing. Solenne, I'm going to head over to you. Would you like me to restate the question?
That would be great.
Look at that. There we go. Okay.
Me and everybody. That was awesome. I got like lost in it. It was so good.
I know. I did too. I was really hypnotized. It's great. Okay. So when you look towards the future and as the menstrual equity movement in Canada is growing, where do you see possibilities for activists and advocates to support one another across different lived realities and sectors?
Yeah, so I see so many possibilities for connecting to support each other across our different lived realities and sectors. So first of all, community-led initiatives, so grassroots movements, intersectional approaches, and promoting reusable products, just to echo a little bit what's been said already, but I think that's really essential. And then the other element I would bring is also to make it fun, to make it, which I think a lot of people are, to bring arts into it, to bring creativity, adaptability, to be open to new ideas. You know, we don't have to create new things. We can get inspired by each other. I think that's really where the strength lies. And to kind of bring it back to my own experience. So getting fired up by reading that book and then be like, oh my God, what's the literature? What's been written about this? And finding that obviously a lot has been written, but a lot of it is really on the negative. A lot of it is on the stigma, on the taboo, on the lack of accessibility, right? So for my master's project, I was like, how can I highlight something, the strategies, the creative strategies of activists, like what are people doing? And a place in the world where there are a lot of stigmas is in Nepal. There's been a lot, globally, there's been a lot of press about it, but there hasn't been as much highlighting the really beautiful grassroots work that people on the ground are doing there. So for my project, it was pandemic times, but I decided to do an analysis of a book that was a co-creation that was done by this NGO operating in Nepal. And it's actually a lot of participants, over 80 participants that drew this book, and they put it together and they put the story together. So it's a book that was created by participants for participants. So it's now informing the same workshops that helped create it. And I thought that was such a beautiful way. And obviously this is very specific, like regionally specific. And they found ways to make it, because Nepal is a very diverse place, just like a lot of places in the world, like religiously, culturally. But they're talking about magic. Instead of talking about religion, they're talking about magic. They're bringing in elements of nature. They're bringing in a lot of like visual representations that are easy to understand, no matter your background, no matter what age you are. So clearly this is very location specific, but initiatives like this could be implemented in a lot of different sectors, and be tailored to specific community groups, could be created by specific community groups. So just to offer us an example of something that has been done that we can knowledge share, we can find out about this, and then maybe someone learns about this and is really excited, maybe is a graphic designer, maybe has that creative spark and wants or inspires some other project. I think that's really a huge strength for the menstrual equity movement in Canada and worldwide. And it takes into account the kind of intersectional approaches that, because these taboos are very locally specific, there's not just one educational workshop that will solve those things. So like at Monthly Dignity, what we try to do is really have people create a space where people feel at ease to share how they were taught about periods and what they've been taught. And then we can kind of go about it and be vulnerable with each other. And what comes up is just so beautiful, because it's so rare that people are able to share their experiences with menstruation in a public setting. You know, often we'll learn about it from one person in our family or at school even. It'll be very secretive, there's a lot of silence and shame. So just the act of having this open dialogue, of creating something together, of having an art project, of making it fun, of making it like pleasurable or positive as much. Like we don't have to love our periods, but at least to have a bit more of a neutral outlook towards them. I think is really empowering and really the way forward. Like it's already such a hard physical experience for so many menstruators that if we can at least try to shift the narrative around it to make it fun, to make it creative, to make it adaptable, I think we can really go far. And that goes from sharing knowledge, like all of us here, not gatekeeping. And I think that already really exists in this movement, which I think is really, really beautiful, but continuing that knowledge sharing, that information sharing, that content sharing, that's where our strength really lies. And the same thing for reusable menstrual products, because they're not so intuitive to use. Like they have to be coupled with education, but finding new ways to bring that. And they're not for everybody, obviously, but if for a lot of people, they are an option, but we just need to kind of, keep finding creative strategies to bring that to different people so that they get destigmatized, they become more accessible. So yeah, I think just by embracing like fun, creative, adaptable information strategies, we can really keep this movement going. So thank you for that question.
Thank you so much, Solenne. And I'm wondering if when we have a moment, I can pass the book around.
Absolutely.
Yeah? Okay, cool. And your response makes me think about what I hear a lot of people saying, which is that we shouldn't replicate things, but we also want to go forward with joy and curiosity. So thank you so much for sharing the insights from your research, but also your practice. And I'm going to pass it over to Angelene. Would you also like me to restate the question? Because I don't mind.
Yes.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's just do it. So, Angelene, when you look towards the future and you see the movement growing, where do you see possibilities for activists to support one another across different lived realities and sectors?
That's to go last. I feel like I don't have much to add. I really identify with everything that was said here. I'm feeling like really moved right now. Like it's kind of hard to talk because I'm feeling all of these things. This is a very fulfilling space today. So thank you, everyone. I feel strongly that I don't have to understand you completely to have empathy for you. I don't have to. I don't know why this is so hard for me right now. I'm so sorry.
Take your time. Take your time.
I have to like have no understanding apparently to like just feel all the feelings. That's just how I feel. Kind of to take it back to 2020 a bit. And the very like ignorant things that we would hear about, why do I need to be a part of this movement, and the variation of the very alternative variation of Black Lives Matter that I don't like to say or bring up, but then having to respond to that and use an analogy to make people understand that they need to be a part of this movement or a movement that is so urgent as well. It's just hard for me to understand why I need to be in your head and in your body, and completely understand you in order to completely have empathy for you. That's just not how I walk through life. And so I've just strongly feel that when we see some sort of issue, a social justice issue, an advocacy issue, it is really on all of us, because it takes all of us. And yes, like the activism burnout and advocacy burnout is so real. And it's it sucks because I want to say like it can't just be on us all the time. Like it can't just be on us. And the amplification is so important. Because it's what we have. We have these like really amazing tools today to be able to spread really, really important information. And as someone who, so a little about me is that I'm a descendant of indentured laborers who were taken, stolen from India and taken all over the British Empire. So from my ancestry, or from my ancestors taken to Fiji specifically to work on plantations for the empire. And then from there, we were also not so nicely asked to leave, and so being here now as an Indo-Fijian Canadian in a twice removed diaspora and trying to figure out where my place is and like what my identity even is and just who I am, that's been, kind of a struggle on its own. But I just feel like through that, that's what for me has built this intense sense of empathy for anyone and everything. I grew up in a town it was predominantly white town, historically a fishing and farming village. Grew up with a lot of ignorance, thrown at my brother and myself and my family. And I found it challenging at times to relate to others, of course, as they found it challenging to relate to myself. And at some point, I was just like, whatever you've been through is whatever you've been through. I've been through what I've been through, and it's very different from what you've been through probably, and you probably don't get it at all. But I was bullied for, how I looked or my hair or the smell of my lunch or whatever. The kid next to me might have been bullied for something that I might have found pedestrian at the time, but I was like, it's whatever you're going through is whatever you're going through. And I can't, I'm not going to create a hierarchy, because I don't really want that done to myself either. And I really found myself just having to, meet people where they were at, right? Meet people where they were at, and bridge that gap. And so, yeah, we're all, activists in our own space, racial justice, menstrual equity. I was able to bring some of that menstrual equity work home, and work with my family on talking about periods. And now my brown dad is all about it, and he's so proud of it. And he tells all the uncles and all of his white coworkers, he's like, she does this cool thing, and I don't really get it, but she talks about periods all over the place, and it's really cool. And that just never would have happened if I didn't enter the space. I didn't take that, work home and then take it home and then also have them, doing it everywhere else as well. And so, yeah, I just, the empathy is really, really big, and we're all so necessary here. And even the ones who don't understand it and don't necessarily want to do this kind of work or take up any space or just, even want to listen, there is still space. I still believe in that. I just want to bring anyone in anywhere I can.
Yeah. Well, you folks are throwing down. This is really serious. I can see so many ways that you're bringing forth aspects of who you are, but also this subtle, boundary between what we're doing and who we are and the people that shape us and the politics we care about. So I just want to express my deep gratitude for all of you for being so generous with yourselves and for the work that you do as well. And I really want to invite the audience now into this conversation. And I'm going to read the question again in case you don't remember it. And of course, you're welcome to ask a question or a comment, but I think we wanted this part of the event to feel a little different. So maybe if you'd like to share a bit about how you might respond to that question, and then the panelists can jump in. I think that'd be nice. So when you look towards the future and as the menstrual equity movement in Canada grows, where do you see possibilities for activists to support one another across different lived realities and sectors?
How we're moving forward together and how we can support people across different intersecting types of activism.
I kind of touched on it in my presentation, and a lot of other people have also talked about trans and non-binary folks in this, and how washrooms are such a fraught space right now, which is ridiculous because everyone deserves the right to pee in peace. But with menstrual equity and the fact that we're all of us talking today, I was really heartened to hear that everyone was using such inclusive language. I was scared a little bit, I'm not going to lie, when I was giving my presentation, like this may be spicy, because menstrual equity has traditionally always been such like a cis woman thing. And to hear so many people using terms that were inclusive of other types of people and bodies that experience menstruation was really, I think for me, it gave me the biggest sense of hope. Oh God, the tears. The biggest sense of hope that I've had from this conference. And I think this is a really powerful space that we can come together and, using a menstrual equity perspective, also make sure that we're instilling aspects of safety into washrooms and really help youth in particular who are in a really scary place right now. I'm thinking of like Saskatchewan and Alberta, for example, where it's not safe for them right now, and I don't know when it will be. But with the work that we're doing, there's such a strong opportunity for us as people who do menstrual equity advocacy and research and talk about it to make sure that we're including people who are really being targeted for things like that right now. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Michaela. I see we've got lots of hands here.
Oh my God. Thank you very much. I just want to say thank you to the organizers. And I know I'm not the one taking the vote of thanks or something, but I really needed to say thank you to the speakers for just being vulnerable, for just being so honest. I feel like it's not like your typical symposium or conference where we're saying a lot of big words, but it's just personal and everyone can relate to it in this room. So thank you very much for that. And just to answer the question, not really answer, but just to contribute to the question that was asked, I would say one very important thing is partnership, collaborating, networking, and just working together. And I know some of the speakers have mentioned it, but I just want to lay more emphasis on it. We're in a country where when you look around the room, there are different people, different tribes, different races, and we know we are all from somewhere. So as much as we're doing so much work in Canada, can we also focus about if you're going to trace down your lineage, your ancestry, where you're from, what work are we doing outside there? Do not, I don't want to say in quote, but don't forget your home. So as much as we're trying to do all of these amazing things in Canada, let's think about India, let's think about Africa, let's think about Jamaica, let's think about the places you're from, because Canada has gone so far and there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. But there are some countries that are not even 5%. They've not accomplished. We're talking about, I was talking with some of the amazing people I met during the networking session. We're talking about dispensaries. It's amazing, $2,000 for a dispensary. And I'm like, in Nigeria, to even afford one sanitary pad is a problem, and which is less than $1. So I'm just saying, as much as we're doing this, and we see a lot of organizations that right out, why I'm saying this is quite personal, because when I reach out, especially when I was still in Nigeria, when you reach out to organizations that are outside doing this amazing work, it's like a straight up no. It's like it's an automated message that you're going to get, oh, we're sorry, but we don't do anything outside. And even some people that go as far as doing it, sometimes it's not very, very genuine. I want to put it out, genuine or intentional. It's just like, let's do something. It's like when people give just to get back tax returns, and it's not necessarily because you want to give, but because you're going to get money back. So let's not do it to just fulfill our righteousness in quote, but let's all start in our different organizations, in whatever we're doing, as much as we are focusing on here, let us start putting, because we're talking about inclusion and all of that, including these other countries. It's not until there's a mate, because you would never see, there are a lot of wars happening right now in different countries. And that's what we see on the media spaces, but you don't really see a lot of news. Media is not interested in quotes. Nobody's going to do push and say there's period poverty and all of that. But millions of people, millions of women, millions of various, people are affected by this. So it's an important conversation, but we only see what the media tells us. So I feel like if there's a takeaway, if you're living this symposium, one thing you should take back with you is that inclusion of the people that still also need it. As much as Canadians need it, there are a lot of people outside Canada that need it too. So if in your organization you're doing 2-3% to include these people, I feel like if everyone takes that decision, we would go a long way forward. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I see like the hands are going off like crazy. Just hold on 1 second. There was a hand over there. And then I'm wondering if I can ask the audience, I just want to give our panelists an opportunity to quickly respond to some of the things that have been said. So if we could have no? Okay. The person no longer has a question. So one more intervention and then I'll let the panelists respond.
I was just helping a bit with the registration of the front desk, and it was obvious that there are not many men, I guess in particular cisgender men. So I was curious, what do you think about what is the role of men in this movement and what can be done in order for men to be more engaged? You see more men here, for example.
I don't want to take too much time. I told a bunch of people this story, but when I was at the registration desk, this guy came up and he was obviously not here for the conference. I was like, he was like very confused. He's like, what is going on with all this situation? Who are you? Why are you here? I work here. You don't work here. And he was
There's like Volvos out there.
Yeah. Is this? Yeah. So he was like, I was like, are you here for the conference? He said, no, but I have a question. And I was like, go on. It's like there are tampons in the men's bathroom. And I was like, yeah, nice. And he was like, why? I just don't understand. And I was like, this could go so many different ways. I was like, I'm not here by myself. Like, and I explained to him, I said, well, not everybody who menstruates is a woman. Not every woman menstruates because some people are trans, some people are non-binary. And then some people have like hormonal IUDs and some people are postmenopause and all these other ways that people experience menstruation. And and then also if the women's bathroom is out and your girlfriend or your mom, whatever, needs products, then you can go into that bathroom and there's extras. And we went back and forth for a little bit. And at the end, he was like, okay, I understand. And, it's just asking questions. I think like the silence goes both ways. As menstruators, it's our job to work on that ourselves, even though it's been inflicted upon us, the stigma and the shame, in order to open up the conversation and let people in, and not gatekeep, even though it's sensitive for us within feeling safe and all those things as well. But when we talk about men and non-menstruators, it's also being willing to ask questions, even if you're really unsure what the answer is going to be and what your reaction is going to be to it, being respectful, and being comfortable being uncomfortable as well. I think that there's just, that's a big one. That just happened this morning. So I just wanted to share the anecdote, but yeah.
Thank you for that response, Hayley. That's great. Solenne, did you want to add as an education expert, if I can call you that? Yeah. Do you have any insights in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, we got to get them young, not to be weird about it, but we do. We really do. We got to get them started. We got to educate everybody. It's so bizarre to educate. Oh no, I'm so sorry. Just keep going. Okay. It's so bizarre to educate half the population on any topic. That's just bizarre. And that happened to me. And I'm going to be 30 soon, but it's not even that long ago that I was in grade 5 and, they were kicking out half the class before this, which is just so too bad because we internalize a lot of menstrual shame. The people that don't have periods and that have gotten literally zero education on this, oh my goodness, they have stigma, but then they just don't know. They honestly just don't know. So I think the role of people, of non-menstruators in the movement, get educated, listen up, and bring it up, talk about it. It's not just on us. I'm so happy to be doing this work. I talk about it with literally everybody. I'm one of those talking on the plane person. It's oh, what do you do? I'm that person. And people are much more responsive than you think. If you approach it in a lighthearted way, and I literally have to talk about it when people ask me what I do for work. So that brings up the conversation right there. But honestly, they're more responsive. Non-menstruators are more responsive than you would think a lot of the time. They're just scared to say the wrong thing. They're scared to ask the wrong question because they just don't know. They just haven't been exposed to it. And when you're not exposed to something, it's scary, right? So I think I'll leave it at that. But I could rant about this for a long time, but it's a great question. And actually, if I can talk about the toilet thing, bringing up the toilets, I feel like toilets, I was on a panel like a couple of weeks ago. Toilets are the intersection of so many things. Like better access to toilet is just, it's inclusivity, it's sustainability, it's accessibility, it's human rights. It's so many things, so many issues converge around sanitation and toilets. Like we can solve so many issues by improving the toilets of society. Maybe that's that's it.
So if it's okay, what I'm going to propose is that we give our wonderful panelists an opportunity to have a final couple thoughts that they can share with you. So maybe, around 2 minutes, and please respond to one of the questions that was posed, engage with something that another participant shared, either up here in the panel or from the audience. Or share something that, you really wanted to say, but just forgot. I always do that on panels. I really hate that. Okay. And I'm going to suggest that we mix up the order. So this time, Solenne, Tenniel, and Hayley, and then Angelene, and then Hayley. Yeah. So it's Solenne, Tenniel, Angelene, Hayley. Solenne, over to you.
I was like, oh my God, I just did my little, I will, yes. Final thoughts. Let's see. I'm like, my brain, I feel like that was the extent of it. No, final thoughts. Yeah, let's find the fun. Let's find the fun in periods. I think it's so important to see like what's going wrong. That's like step one, and it's awesome. And we got to keep doing that. But then how do we make it accessible? When I'm doing workshops with the youngins, with the teenagers, etc., the period pain simulator videos, I will not tell you, they are so well received. So many people are asking, can you please bring it next time you do a workshop? So many non-menstruators want to try them. That is a great thing. Let's bring technology, let's bring popular culture, even movies like Carrie, which is like a horror movie, just any kind of representation. Representation matters in all its shapes and forms. Big Mouth, I don't know if anyone's seen that. There's a bunch of cartoons, there's lots of things that are happening. Let's just make it a little bit sneaky everywhere, not just the health class one time in grade 5. Let's just bring it a little bit, because it is a part of daily life. It's all the time. And I think our representations, it should represent that. That should be how it is. It's just part of it. And that's what's going to really, our work will be so much less important when it doesn't garner as much shock, when it doesn't generate a huge reaction from people. That's when our work will be done. I don't think that's in the near future, but it's so great to see so many people working on this. So I'm leaving today very motivated and fired up. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Tenniel, over to you.
There's so many ideas. I think what I wanted to finish on is I think that, a couple of things. I wanted to respond to the piece about how to include cis men into the space. And I agree with what everyone said in terms of education, starting young. But I was thinking about offering folks an idea of a role they can have. Because folks are more comfortable coming into a space. They're like, okay, I do that. Or I can answer the phone. Or I can respond to emails. So I think that's, in addition to the education, maybe thinking of specific things, practical things that folks that don't menstruate, that are, could actually do in the space. I think that would help. And I think just making it okay to be in the space. I think often there's a feeling of oh, that's not, is it appropriate? I should leave the exit. You know what I mean? That kind of vibe. So if it's no, this is we're all here, right? How are 50% of folks getting this information? I think that would help quite a bit, just to invite people into the space and say, yes, you belong here. And there's a specific role that we actually need you to do because we cannot do it. So that was one thing I was thinking of. And then I wanted to speak to your statement that you make. What's your name? Jeanette. Okay. Thank you so much, because I think international spaces, thinking about taking this work out of Canada is so important. I think often as an afterthought. But if you believe any of what's said about Canada, we're multicultural, right? We're all here, right? We're internationally here. So it does make it so important that it's not an afterthought, This is not like, well, we've done all the things and we do this afterwards. It's like, no, from the beginning, from the planning, from the conception of it, that is so important. Finally, so many people have talked about wanting to move, right? All the researchers, a couple of people talked about, I want to hear more about the lived reality, more stories. And so let's make sure that the stories we're hearing are intersectional, please. Right? The example of this panel, like folks that are here in this space, like, let's make sure that when we're doing that type of research and connecting with folks, that there are many, many, many different stories. And I think that's going to help in a large way for us to get good information about what's going to make a difference in the future. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well said. I'll pass it to you, Angelene.
Yeah, I would love to respond a bit. That was a great question. Thank you so much. So when I became involved in the movement, I didn't know that I was like in a movement. I was just doing, like, I was just giving youth supplies, and I didn't realize that period poverty and menstrual equity were like these labeled, named things. And then I was very intrigued, jumped in and did all the things. And so when I started talking about it at home more, because I grew up in a very, brown Hindu household, it was very, patriarchal, religion-wise. We're not supposed to pray or enter a house of worship at all. When we're on our period, it's considered, we're considered dirty, but that's a cultural thing. It's not actually written in any of our scripture. It was just, people interpreting things and running with it in a really negative way anyways. And so, when I started speaking on this with my brother, we have a podcast together, and we were just talking about our intersection of periods within our household. And I was just telling him about how, because he similarly asked, he was just like, well, what do I do? Do I need to do anything? Or, and I was like, well, at your house, you should just have some supplies in your under the sink in the washroom. And he was like, well, why? And I'm like, well, because when I come over, if anyone comes over, they're there. And he's also a comedian, and so I totally identify with make it fun. Let's make it fun. Let's make it silly a bit. And so I was like, and think about you're dating a girl or whatever, and she comes over and she gets her period, and think of the hero that you will be because you've got supplies in the house right now. That's a second date. That's a third date. That's a relationship, So now he puts that into his bits, and it's really funny. So I go to some of his shows, and he's just, my sister does this thing, talks about periods, just like my dad, of course. And then he puts this thing into his bits and jokes about, this thing of putting supplies in his washroom. And, now the girls really like it. It's never happened. But he says, I mean, it's happened with family, with us, but it's never happened with, girls or whatever. But then he says it in a room, of all these people, and it just, plants the seed, so it's really cool. It's really cool. It's really funny. Yeah. Men should be a part of the conversation too.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. So we have about 2 minutes remaining. Hayley, I'm going to pass it over to you. If someone could get our mic. Thank you.
Good. I'll be super quick because I'm very excited for the next panel. The one thing I'll say quickly is just I think a lot of people in this room know, the power of sharing stories is so there. Creating spaces where people feel safe to talk about their periods is the biggest barrier. So they're so often in workshops, and this is for 7 years for me in this space where you go into a room with youth, with Solenne and Estelle's there, works with us too. And the kids are like, I don't want to talk about it. Ew, disgusting. I can't believe these people are here. I don't want to look at them. I don't want to people, I was joking that there's very few jobs you walk in and a bunch of kids are you have a thick skin, but people, they don't want to talk about it. And then afterwards it's from, fifth graders to, 80-year-old women come up to you afterwards and they're just pulling their hearts out with all these personal stories. my discharge is a bit of a loose color. Like, what do you think that's about? And like, where does that happen? And that would have never happened before. And it's like just creating these spaces. And the moment you give like an inch, it's like that's so bottled up in people that you're so forbidden from talking about it. The moment you give them like such a like small amount of permission to talk about it, they just like it pours out of them, like no pun intended. And so it's just wonderful to see. And it's just like, I think if there's one thing that you can do, it's just creating that space, which you can do again, like I said earlier, at your dining room table. That's all.
Yeah, wonderful. So thank you to all of our panelists